This week on YCN Vermont Wrap, we're going to spend our time discussing the current state of the state with Republican candidate for Bennington's District 2-1, Kevin Hoyt. Thanks for joining us this week, and come on, let's go have some fun. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. Now, normally on the program, we'd spend some time discussing the top news stories of the week, along with a little bit of snarky commentary, and we'd sandwich in an interview in between the news block and the political potpourri segment. This week, however, in light of the stories that we brought last week, the stories that we talked about, and based on the feedback from the analysis of those stories, I wanted to spend a bit more time bringing you a portion of a conversation that I had earlier in the week with my guest, Kevin Hoyt. Kevin is a Republican seeking to represent Bennington's 2-1 district and is, among other things, a fierce proponent of Second Amendment rights here in the Green Mountain State. Kevin joins me from Brattleboro. Kevin, welcome to YCN Vermont Wrap. Thanks for taking time out of your day to be a part of the program.
Thank you for having me, Keith. I appreciate it.
Now, Republican running for Bennington District 2-1. You've got a number of Democrats that are jockeying for that position. The incumbent stepping down, saying she's not seeking re-election. That's Rachel Fields. How is it traditionally run there in that seat? Has it leaned Democrat or Republican?
Yeah, I think Bennington is a good representation of all Vermont. We've obviously leaned in the Democratic fashion for a long time. Right. I'm a little tiny red fish in a big blue sea.
So, I mean, realistically, what do you think the chances are that you'll win that seat?
You know, I'm not really sure. As a Republican, I think I'm an underdog. I think I started as an underdog, but I'm hoping on common sense. I'd like to get rid of the stigmas, I guess, that go ahead with, you know, Democrat versus Republican or liberal and conservative. I think we need both. I like the checks and balance systems, but it's the extremes that we want to deal with. I'm looking for people that are after common sense. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm one of the only candidates that can say I was born and raised in Vermont. I've lived here my whole life. I think that's important to understand our culture and way of life. And I'm hoping there's some certain issues, specifically the gun issues, that are going to bring out conservatives. That's one of the problems is, you know, less than 10% of our population votes. So we basically allow a very small portion of the liberal-minded side, too, I might add, you know, dictate our laws and lives. And I'm hoping this issue brings honest, hard-working American gun owners out. This is a big issue to me. That's what caused me to run. And I don't think I'm the only Vermonter that feels that way. This is our core. This is the very being of who we are. Just like in the 1770s, I'm counting on Vermonters to come out and stand up for our Second Amendment rights.
Now, the numbers from the Secretary of State's office that we reported on last week, it was 22.4% of registered voters actually came out to vote. It's about 476,000 registered voters in the Green Mountain State. This is a primary. You know, usually you get a lighter turnout during the primaries, but 22.4%. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, historically, good, bad, average? Is that what you would expect, or do you think that this was a dismal turnout?
You know, that actually, I guess overall, if you look at history, it's not bad. It's ridiculous. When more people vote for American Idol than the President of the United States, there's something wrong going on. And I used to be one of those people, especially conservatives. I think we stay up on the hill and we, you know, shoot deer and we mind our own business. We let the world run amok, and unfortunately we don't vote as a whole. And I was guilty of that too. I didn't think my vote counted, but it does, and it starts at a small level. So if you're out there complaining, really you have nothing to complain about unless you vote. This is our fault. I blame us, everybody, because we're allowing this to happen, and it's getting worse and worse. So now it is my business, and I was forced to run.
You know, it's interesting, when you look at what motivates voters, there's a concept called public choice theory, and ultimately what it boils down to is how is that individual voter directly going to benefit from the act of getting off the couch, heading down to the polls, and actually casting a vote? What do you think conservatives and Republicans specifically need to do to incentivize voters to, in keeping with that public choice theory, establish that connection between cause and effect, their vote versus what they live with for the rest of that period, that person who ultimately occupies that seat as a representative, as a senator, as governor, that period of time that they're spending in office.
Right. I wish I knew the answer to that, Keith. I mean, that's what I've been trying to do. I've had a number of, I don't want to use the word gimmick at all, but a number of events and sponsored things to try to get people to vote, voter registration parties. You know, at the beginning of August here, I gave away a bunch of free AR-15s. And again, that gun was on purpose because that's the go-to gun. I think people who don't like the AR-15 don't understand what it is. They don't understand gun laws or definitions. So I wanted to talk to those people about it. But again, I thought that would bring out a lot of people, and it did. I mean, we had about 500 people show up for our registration party, which is a pretty good turnout for Bennington. But to be honest, I expected a lot more. So I don't know how to get people, you know, fired up like I am. I don't know. I wish I did.
Republican Kevin Hoyt, seeking the state representative seat for Bennington's 2-1 district, joins me from Brattleboro. You're watching YCN Vermont Wrap. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. Kevin Hoyt, Republican, seeking the state representative seat for Bennington's 2-1 district, joins me from Brattleboro. Kevin, thank you so much for being a part of the program.
Thanks again, my pleasure.
You know, one of the things that you and I discussed off air when we were talking about setting this interview up was the issue with Kaya Morris and specifically Christine Hallquist, two individuals, two Democrats, who both say have received death threats, hateful messages, vitriol. Hallquist, of course, still in the race, but Kaya Morris, very surprisingly, a couple of, about 9 days, 8-9 days ago, just surprisingly announced, after having received the nomination from the Democrat Party, announced that she's actually vacating her seat. One of the things that I talked about on this program was, you know, I kind of suspect a lot of those may be fabricated. They may be attempts by that party and by that campaign to garner sympathy and further vilify the evil Republicans and the evil conservatives in the Green Mountain State. I really don't see a lot of these threats actually coming from people right of center. What are your thoughts on this, both in the context of Kaya Morris and also of Christine Hallquist?
Well, you know, I think it's a very sad situation, to be honest, on a number of levels. First of all, I don't, you know, endorse or support any supremacy groups, any racism, any discrimination for any person, not just towards Kaya. I think the problem that I have with Kaya, and I like Kaya as a person, I've worked with her on a number of different events to great success. I think she's done a lot of good for the state of Vermont. My problem was I really didn't like her gun control issues. I don't know why anybody would advocate for laws that we know are going to raise crime. So I questioned her on that, and unfortunately, for simply questioning, you know, her policies, I was labeled a racist and a white supremacist and a Nazi. I've never been called these things before in my life, and I think it's specifically incited, you know, by the Morris family. Now, as far as the evidence against them, I haven't seen any, and that's concerning for a couple different reasons. I know when I received my death threat, I've been getting death threats, I was very quick to post it. I was upset about it, and I shared that with the public. In 2 years is what Kaya has been claiming worth of threats. I haven't seen a single one. I've seen a couple really bad taste cartoons, which were absolutely racist and inappropriate, but it's the freedom of speech. So I'm confused as far as the death threats. I've shown you my death threat. I haven't seen anything from Kaya, and it's very upsetting to me that she's calling Vermonters racist, because I don't think we are at all. In fact, I think that's what this giant uproar that you're seeing now is. We don't want racism in Vermont, and maybe I'm blind. I'm not a colored man, and you know, I don't feel the pressure as far as a colored person, but I do as a gun owner. I know gun owners of Vermont are and have been being discriminated against for a long time, and likewise, this isn't just local anymore. Now, per Miss Morris's words, this has gone national, that Vermonters are racists. And I don't believe that for a second.
But Kevin, don't you understand that when a progressive Democrat can't win the argument based on merit, or when they don't have an answer for the question that you're asking, or if you illustrate their hypocrisy, the go-to, the low-hanging fruit for the intellectually impotent is to hurl out accusations of racism.
Right.
Then you spend your time defending why you're not a racist. You abandon the original argument. They win by default. It's a classic Alinsky tactic that the progressive left has been using for decades now.
Well, it's exactly the same thing. You know, everything that they're accusing others of, I stand firm that they're guilty of, and then some. In fact, again, all I've seen is this really bad racist cartoon. I've got a note that threatens my life, but again, it's just words. I consider the things that Ms. Morris has done through policy change, stripping of rights and freedoms from every American, or every Vermonter at least, to be much, much more upsetting and offensive. So right now I haven't seen anything. I hope racism isn't happening in Vermont. I don't believe it is. I'm not seeing it, at least not on the extreme level that she's claiming. I'm seeing a lot from them, but I really haven't seen anything, any evidence. And likewise, I think the fact that Kaya came to Vermont State not so long ago, and she had a good job and she advanced really fast and she was living life, I think that kind of also says how un-racist we are. She did good for herself in Vermont. Because Vermonters are open and willing to accept anybody. The problem here is conversation and communication. We are not communicating anymore. I'm willing and open to listen to their side. Again, gun control. If anybody can show me one time in the entire history of the country where gun control will work, then I might listen. But they can't do that. Come try to change my mind. I'm open to your side, but you got to listen to mine too, is the problem.
As I've said before, I do believe, maybe not in every instance, but I do believe that the death threats between Hallquist and Morris, a lot of them, quite frankly, are fabricated. And I would be lying to you if I didn't tell you, I get at least, between my radio shows and this television program, I get at least one death threat a week. In fact, if it's kind of gotten to the point now, I joke about it, if I don't get a death threat, I figure like I'm doing something wrong, or I'm losing my edge. Republican Kevin Hoyt joins me from Brattleboro. Much more of YCN Vermont Wrap right after this. I'm Keith Hanson. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm joined by Republican Kevin Hoyt, seeking the Bennington 2-1 District State Representative seat. He joins me from Brattleboro. Kevin, thanks again for being a part of the program.
No problem.
You know, you brought up guns, certainly a hot-button topic, especially in Vermont. The gubernatorial race, especially on the Republican side, certainly seems centered upon the S-55 and Act 16 issues. You know, of course, Phil Scott being challenged by Keith Stern, the Democrat turned Republican, now turned seemingly Democrat again. John Freedom Boy Rogers, who I had on the program a couple of times, you know, very, very, very strong Second Amendment advocate. It seems like this race, at least in Vermont, has become a referendum on guns.
I hope so. I hope this is the year of the gun in Vermont.
Now, with what happened with S-55, with that package of bills, now it's not really affecting guns per se. We're talking about the age to purchase. We're talking about magazine restrictions. We're talking about bump stock bans, background checks, even between instructors and students, things like that. Can that lost ground be regained? And also, gun owners of Vermont announcing this week that they have filed suit, that they have been given a court date. What do you think the outcome of that court case is going to be?
In my opinion, it's cut and clear. These are unconstitutional, both the federal and with the Vermont Constitution. So I think they're going to win. I think the chances of these getting repealed is very, very high. They should be repealed. They do absolutely nothing except for, again, raise crime rates. If we look at the historic evidence, we don't even have to guess at this anymore. This is going to raise crime rates and make it more dangerous for Vermonters. I'm against all of these plans. I've got a better way, actually.
Okay, that was something that you had alluded to. We actually did not have this conversation off air, but you had mentioned that there was a plan that you wanted to unveil on the program. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to do that. We're going to do that right after the next commercial break. I guess one of the questions that I would have for you, and I theorize and speculate on this quite often, but Why are guns, for the progressive Democrats in the state of Vermont, why is this such a major issue for them?
I think it's control. I think it's ultimate control. If you get rid of the Second Amendment, then all the others are up for grabs. This is the ultimate fear, right? And the people who are out there saying, you know, we're not after your guns, if you think that, then you're wrong. You know, I think your average person, your average Democrat who is looking at this, they're okay with the Second Amendment. They just don't want violent and crazy people to have guns, which is just like me and you, Keith, everybody. But they don't understand the laws and the legislator that the leaders of the Democrat Party are passing. They are after all guns, be absolutely clear. That's what they want.
You know, and I've said this many times, both on this program and also certainly on my radio show. I think it isn't about the guns per se. I think what it boils down to is the fact that they just don't like people like you and people like me, and they hate the fact that people that they don't like have the ability to not be pushed around by them. It's pretty hard to tell a person who's armed what to do and what they're not going to do.
It absolutely is, and I'm going to give you the word of the day, and it's liberal supremacist, right? And if you're dealing with one, just say the word and you're going to know that you're dealing with one. I don't like any kind of supremacy, any kind of discrimination. The problem here is their way is the only way. If you disagree or try to have an alternate say or an opinion, any idea or thought that's against them is bad. You're instantly Hitler and a white supremacist in the case of Miss Morris. But they have to, you know, defame you. They try to, you know, assassinate your character. There's a whole bunch of things that aren't being talked about. That's what I'm saying. The communication is at an all-time low right now, and it's a terrible thing. We're setting ourselves up for a huge bang here.
Kevin Hoyt joins me from Brattleboro. You're watching YCN Vermont Wrap. Much more after this. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. Joining me from Brattleboro, Kevin Hoyt, a Republican seeking the seat for Bennington's District 2-1. Kevin, welcome back.
Thanks again.
One of the things we were just talking about, guns and education. Now, you had mentioned that you have a plan that could help to provide safe schools at a minimal cost and not interrupt anybody's rights. So I'm curious to hear what this plan involves.
Right, no cost. Actually, funding is already in place along with the curriculum. I'm talking about the world's premier go-to when it comes to firearm safety, the International Hunter Education System. I've been pushing for 14 years, actually, long before I was a candidate, as far as environmentalist, conservationist, outdoorsman. That's kind of what I do, is a recruitment and retention for the outdoor shooting sports, right? And in Vermont, I think that's the key to growth and development. Economic growth and development is these beautiful natural resources that we have, our land and our wildlife. So again, gun safety, those natural resources are all put into one great course. It's called Hunter Education, and I'd like to see that mandated in every school in Vermont state. Number one, we're going to put armed teachers. That's right, I want to put guns in schools. I want to get rid of the sign that says gun-free zone, and I want a sign that says any attempts to harm our children will be met with deadly force. So now I have a teacher that is not only trained to teach, but also trained to concealed carry by the state of Vermont in the school. So I think that's going to make it safer now. And again, if you look at the historical evidence behind hunter education, this stuff works. It's greatly impacted the number of gun deaths and injuries in the shooting sports, and I think it can do the same thing for, you know, just basic gun ownership. Again, if people take this course, it doesn't mean necessarily that they have to hunt or purchase a firearm, but they're going to understand the science behind conservation. They're going to know it's a deadly weapon and you don't point it at somebody and you know your target and beyond, and you know the basic format. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. Again, curriculum, funding, everything's in place. All we got to do is start doing it.
You know, well, first of all, you're going to make liberal heads explode over there because, you know, guns in schools, we can't possibly have that. But, you know, the response to one terrorist attack on September 11th, 2001 was to put air marshals and federal flight deck officers into commercial aircraft. And yet we have many school shootings. I mean, it's not as many as the drive-by media would have you believe, but still, there are multiple instances of very deadly school shootings in this country.
We've done nothing to protect our schools in Vermont.
And
we've done a lot of talking about it, but absolutely zero when it comes to actually changing anything or doing it.
how close to fruition do you think that plan actually is? How much would it take to actually get that plan implemented here in Vermont?
Well, you know, it's funny. Vermont actually does this on an extracurricular activity. We've involved schools before. I'm actually talking about a mandated class. I'd like to see in the 7th grade school year, kids go for half a year of physical education, a quarter of sex education, and then a quarter of firearms education. And again, we're talking about a normal 12-hour course. Now we got a whole quarter in the school year, so we can really expand, hit those key talking points, and train our kids. I don't know why we're not teaching this stuff to our children. Is the wildlife and your land, your natural resources, or gun safety important to you? Why aren't we telling our kids?
Because we assign the wrong name to these people. They're not conservationists, they're preservationists. Right. They don't want anything touched. They don't want any type of logging. They want you to touch nothing.
Right.
They don't want animal management, wildlife management. They want nobody shoots deer. They don't, and they certainly don't want their kids being taught about guns, because that's not education, that's indoctrination. And the only indoctrination that they want to see occurring is the indoctrination that supports their narrative. Kevin, that's about all the time that we've got, unfortunately, but we'll get you back on at some other point. I certainly do appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us. And
I appreciate you having me. Thank you. All right, thank you. Have a great day, Keith.
You too. Thank you. That's going to do it for this week's edition of YCN Vermont Wrap. My thanks to Kevin Hoyt for joining us this week. And as always, be sure to share with me your thoughts about this week's program. The email is khanson@ycnnow.com. That's khanson@ycnnow.com. If you email, be sure to let me know the city or town that you live in as well. And be sure to follow me on Twitter @RealKeithHanson. That's @RealKeithHanson on Twitter. Have a fantastic Labor Day weekend, everybody. Be safe. Talk to you next week.